Hello Reds and welcome to a special 100% United Flashback show. With the 20th anniversary of the 1999 treble this weekend, we're looking back on that magical year and sharing our memories of it. I'm your host TC and I'm joined by my co-host Scott. Hello mate.
Hello mate.
So let's jump in our time machines and get back to the end of the 90s. A decade to end all decades. Eric Cantona had left United and Arsenal had won the double in 98. We started the season getting spanked by Arsenal 3-0 in the Charity Shield. The start of an unforgettable journey. Who would have thought we would achieve the greatest season in British football history on that day at Wembley, Scott?
Definitely not me, mate. I remember I was there with my old man and we were an absolute mile off. I think maybe Arsenal wanted to keep their momentum going from their good couple of seasons that they had had. But yeah, we were a mile off that day.
Yes, mate. I seem to remember back in the day when we lost the Charity Shield, we normally did pretty well in that season.
Yeah, well, I think that we were usually in it. So Fergie sort of saw it as his last pre-season friendly. And a lot of other teams, it was a rare appearance for them in it. So they used it as a real game. But we sort of just use it as our last warm-up game.
Exactly. And of course, after a couple of weeks of season, we bolstered the squad, signing Dwight York from Aston Villa, a big signing at the time. And it looked like a man to finally try to replace the king, Eric Cantona.
Yeah, it was quite a surprising signing, wasn't it? I remember Teddy Sheringham was pretty pivotal up front with Andy Cole.
Yeah.
And it was maybe a signing that we had wanted a couple seasons before, but maybe caught us all by surprise. I remember the first few games of the season, we weren't that great. We drew at home to Leicester, and remember it was after the World Cup when David Beckham got sent off, and he was sort of public enemy number one.
He really was.
Yeah, I was at that West Ham game, this first away game of the season, and they were all over him, hanging effigies outside the ground, and it was pretty embarrassing. Then we signed him just after that game when we went to Upton Park. We couldn't score that day, and we sort of, maybe we needed a bit of firepower up front and someone to sort of link the midfield and the attack.
Yeah, I think Fergie realised we needed two men to replace Eric, not just the one.
Definitely.
It's funny, mate. You know, it just highlights how different the times were. Obviously, back in 99, I was actually on school holiday off in Alicante, and I used to go nip down the shop every day, grab the Sun in the Sun, as it was called in those days, a hard copy of the paper. It's all you had those days. We didn't have news on the internet or anything like that. The internet was very, very young. And I would literally find out about signings in the newspaper, just like everyone else did. And Dwight York had arrived for, 12.5 million, I think?
Around that, yeah.
Yes, and obviously, mate, it was one of the greatest years in our history. We're going to focus on the run-in today, because obviously we'll be here for about 5 hours otherwise. But I know you wanted to highlight one particular match in the season that you thought was a pivotal moment.
Oh, it definitely was. That FA Cup fourth round at home to Liverpool, where we went 1-0 down very early on to a Michael Owen goal. Again, it wasn't a game that we were bossing. We weren't the better team for a good portion of the game and managed to sort of buck our eyes up in the last 5 minutes and come away with it. But I think that was where the never say die attitude was born and really came into fruition.
Yes, mate, and we weren't always the better team on the day in that year, in that season, but we were always the team with the biggest heart and the biggest fight. And like you say, we just never gave up. You know, we did have our ups and downs, but back in the day, obviously we've got some younger fans who'll be listening. These days, you've got these clubs who win the titles and they run away with it. You know, they lose one or two games in a season. Back in the 90s, it just wasn't possible. The depth of quality in that league, the different styles you'd have to come up against, the different styles of football, the different pitches, the different stadiums, the different environments you'd come up against. There was way more variables back then than there is now.
Yeah, there definitely was. The rivalry we had with Arsenal was fantastic. We really pushed each other to play much better and to get the best out of each other. But as well, you've got to remember the Champions League group that we were in that year had Barcelona, Bayern Munich and Brøndby in it, all champions of their respective leagues. And getting through that, I know we didn't win the group, but just getting through it, we went to the Nou Camp, a 3-3 draw, which they were lucky that it was a 3-3. I thought we were really, really great that day. And I think that as well gave us confidence in the European stage that maybe we could push on and finally get over the last hurdle.
Yeah, I think, you're alluding to we were getting battle-hardened in Europe, weren't we? Mm-hmm. We had some ding-dong battles with Juve in the preceding years. Like you say, we actually drew twice to Bayern and twice to Barca in the group.
Yeah.
Smashed Brøndby twice, finished second, knocked Barca out in the process. We're obviously destined to meet Bayern again in the final. But yes, like you say, a group. I always preferred it back in the day when we had a harder group because I thought, as I say, it battle-hardened us for the later rounds. I didn't really ever like having an easy group. And if we've got younger listeners listening, there wasn't so much of a thing as an easy group back then because you didn't have the top four qualifying.
Absolutely. And you've got to think as well that was back in the day that the top 2 teams from each group didn't automatically qualify. It was the champion of the group, the top 1 of the group, and then the best 2 runners-up would qualify as well. It wasn't just an automatic qualification for the second team to get through. We got through because we were the best of the second best out of the second in the groups.
Yeah, absolutely, buddy. Absolutely. And we're going to start our rundown today in the running. Set the scene, first leg of the Champions League against Juventus at Old Trafford, where we started our little run of late goals and comebacks.
Yeah, and I was really, really fortunate that I did manage to get to quite a lot of games that year. We had our season tickets in the South Stand, and we're right in front of both goals that day. I remember my old man came pick me up. I was at boarding school, and he came pick me up on the way, and we went for that game. And talk about a game that we weren't the better team. We were chasing the game in a long part of that. And, it was a really important goal, that Giggsy equaliser in the last minute.
It was, and that Juventus team was an outstanding team. You had Zidane and Davids and Conte really in the middle.
Del Piero up front.
Yeah, absolutely. Nedved. It was a savage team. Mm-hmm. And we had lost 3 out of 4 in the last couple of years against them as well. Obviously, Zidane set up Antonio Conte, the Chelsea boss, for the first. And like you say, Giggsy at the far post in the 92nd.
Yeah, back before he had a full head of hair.
Yeah, he's funny, isn't he, Conte? The player who had no hair and the manager who did. So he did it the wrong way around, didn't he? That's so weird. But yeah, I think that was one of the nights, as we've alluded to. Juventus were the standard that we looked up to, that the team that we, I know again, some listeners might not be aware of this, but in the 90s, Italian football was the pinnacle.
It really was.
All the record signings, all the best players in the world, the players of the year, in general, they came from the Italian league, Serie A. And also as youngsters, and obviously at a time where Sky Sports was very new, on Sundays on Channel 4, you'd always get a Serie A game. So Italian football was, if you like, the Spanish football of the day.
Yeah, I think it was Paul Gascoigne when he went to Lazio, they really started to televise more Italian football on English TV. And then Paul Ince went a couple of years later, went to Inter Milan. But yeah, it just stemmed from them being fantastic defenders of the ball and just really, really difficult to beat. But yeah, they had finalists and winners of the Champions League all throughout the 90s.
Yeah, you're right. The Italian teams, what they tended to do, they had a rock-solid defence, tactically very, very astute. Mm-hmm. But they also had the money in those days. So you'd have a tactically astute and strong Milan side, but you'd have the best player in the world, George Weah, up front.
Yeah.
You'd have an Inter team who were as tight as you like, and then you'd have Ronaldo and Baggio up front. You'd have Juve, you'd have Del Piero on the left, you'd have Inzaghi, Boksic. So in terms of, Zidane creating the chances as well. Mm-hmm. So as you say, they were tactically amazing, and they had amazing defenders as well, amazing midfielders, but they also, all the best strikers in the world, Batistuta, all the gang were in Italy too.
Yeah, they really had world-class talent all over the pitch.
Of course, mate, 1-1 draw at home to Juventus. Having to go away to Turin in the second leg is not the greatest result, but it gave us something to hang on to. And there was no time for breath in those days. The games weren't spread out. It was just a few days later, the 11th of April, we headed to Villa Park for the semi-final of the FA Cup against Arsenal, our old enemy again.
Yeah, and again, a game I was very fortunate to have gone to. It was a pretty dour performance. I think Roy Keane came really close, but I'll let you into something. I was sitting there with my old man, and neither of us thought that extra time was a thing in the first leg. I thought it was always just for the second leg. So,
which obviously these days it is, Scott. These days it totally is. It's a very, very unusual thing. Another thing for new listeners that I just have to touch on, that for a first leg to go to extra time, and then there were no penalties, it would go to a replay then, and you'd have extra time again. So you'd have 2 matches of 120 minutes. Yeah. But yeah, you and your old man were there, and what happened, mate?
Yeah, we left. Come the final whistle, as soon as it rang, we made our dash for the exits and left. And it was only once
on 90 minutes.
Yeah, on 90 minutes. Only when we got in the car and we realised, wow, the traffic really isn't that bad. We really got out really good, and turned the radio on, and they're introducing the second leg. And I've never listened to a United game hoping we don't score, just hoping it stays 0-0, because I didn't want to live with that for the rest of my life, that I missed the goal or what would have put us through the FA Cup final. So when it did come around 0-0 full time, we were both pretty relieved.
Blooming hell, mate. So obviously 11th of April, my birthday on the 12th. Back in those days, there was no time for messing around. 3 days later, we played Arsenal again at Villa Park. Yeah. We'd had 120 minutes smashing lumps out of each other. And then just 3 days later, we headed back to Villa Park. All the fans, these days, they mess around, don't they? They wait weeks to play replays. Back then, it was straight back there.
Yeah, and another big difference was that these days with the introduction of social media and sort of the rule now that teams have to be announced at least an hour before kickoff, back then it really wasn't like that, and you really did get surprised by team lineups and by shake-ups in the team. And I never forget, he started with Paul Scholes, Ryan Giggs, both on the... I think Andy Cole and Dwight York were on the bench as well, because he started with Sheringham Solskjaer, and people in Villa Park, they were going crazy. Fergie, do you even want to win this? You know, we actually thought he was prioritising maybe for the European Cup or for the massive games we had in the run-in. Yeah, he really caught us surprised with that team selection that day.
Yeah, he did, mate. And our man David Beckham stepped up, didn't he, on the big occasion? A habit that he got into in the 99 season, ramming everyone's taunts down their throats. Really, really great goal to begin with. Long ranger from Becks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't forget, it was against David Seaman as well, right? Probably the best English goalkeeper of the 90s, one of the best goalkeepers around that day. And really, what a goal. And a goal that really gets overlooked now because of what else happened in the game. But I have to say, I might have said it before on the podcast, but that was the best game I'd ever been to. Probably the best game I will ever go to. It just had absolutely everything, mate.
So you got to go to the replay as well, did you, pal?
We did. We did.
Jammy kid.
Yeah. It was just a game that had absolutely everything. The ebbs and flows of knockout football never been more apparent than in that night.
Absolutely, mate. I'll let you describe it more than me because I was watching on the telly, unfortunately. Bergkamp obviously equalised from range as well. Schmeichel probably should have kept it out, if we're honest. And then
It got deflected. It got deflected, right?
It did, but Schmeichel still normally saves those. Let's be fair.
Yeah, but as we've seen with our goalkeeper nowadays, that once you get wrong-footed, and you know you've been wrong-footed, you sort of just you're stuck, aren't you?
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. It's a fair point, but I still thought Schmeichel should have kept it out. But obviously 1-1, and then Phil Neville brought down Ray Parlour.
Well, but no, before that, we had Roy Keane got sent off about 80th minute, which was second bookable offence. And I never forget, he saw it coming and just untucked his shirt in anger and drudged off down the tunnel. And that's when we thought, God, this magical run, these dreams that we've had of winning this treble, these might be unravelling tonight.
Yeah, well, that was his second red card in an FA Cup semi-final replay, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. It was.
So, yeah, 10-man United, and then Ray Parlour took on Phil Neville in the final minute, skinned him. Phil Neville brought him down, and it looked, for all the world, pal, that our treble dreams were going to be shattered, and the FA Cup would be no longer on the plate.
Yeah, my old man said, come on, son, Bergkamp's not missing this. And I said, after Saturday that you made us leave early, there's no way we're leaving early tonight, mate.
And there's no way I'm listening to you again.
Yeah, no chance. You can go sit in the car if you want. I'm not. But again, Dennis Bergkamp was one of the best players in England that decade. Bergkamp to miss a penalty was rarer than anything you'll ever find, He usually dispatched them pretty easily.
He did, mate, and you would never see him miss another penalty after that because he never took another one. Mm-hmm. It broke him as a man. Really? He never took another penalty after Schmeichel thwarted him and propelled us into extra time. It was like one of those boxing bouts that goes 12 rounds, and at the end, both boxers just looking to stand up, and just occasionally someone finds that little second wind, that little bit of extra to finish the fight.
And I have to say that night, the last person you would have expected it to be was Ryan Giggs, because he was giving the ball away left, right and centre when he came on. I remember a guy behind us screamed, "Giggs, my grandmother could play better than that." He was definitely the last person you would have expected to be the hero that night.
Yeah, but as became a habit in 99, the heroes were shared around from game to game. And Patrick Vieira looked up, spread the ball wide to Giggs, just inside his own half. And Giggsy set off. And it's one of those goals, mate, that it will never be that good again as when you saw it live. I mean, I know you were in the ground, so even better. But it was one of those goals where when you didn't know what was going to happen, it was just incredible. It lifted you off your seat as he went on his run. And it got harder and harder. There were too many skinned at the end. That was the hardest part. And then to fire it through and over Seaman, it was just one of the most unbelievable goals we'll ever see.
Definitely. And it just shows it's been 20 years and I'd never get tired of watching that goal. If there's ever a time that it's on or, a highlight is there, I always watch it. And it still amazes me that he got through all those players. And again, you're not talking about second-rate defenders here. You're talking about full England internationals, a great defence they had, Keown, Dixon, Adams.
Yeah.
I must have seen that goal probably 2,000 times, and I still can't believe he got through everyone.
Yeah, you see Scholesy in the middle, steaming in, trying to get the square ball.
Yeah.
I've never seen Scholesy run so fast in my life.
Never.
Unbelievable. He had some pace on him, Scholesy.
Yeah, just to get in the right place at the right time, right?
That hunger, mate. Yeah. That hunger.
But it just showed that one moment of brilliance, no matter how bad you've played beforehand, One moment is all you need and everything changes. And that, again, was a massive tribute of this team that forget the 85 minutes we played beforehand. Fine, we're 1-0 down. It's all about these next 5 minutes. It's all about this next chance. And you just knew we were always going to get a chance.
And as we just touched on, mate, let's not forget we had played one of the very, very best teams in Europe, gone toe-to-toe with them for 90 minutes. 4 days later, we'd played 120 minutes against the second best team in England, and an amazing team, one of the teams of the decade. Let's not mess around. Arsenal were a really, really strong side. And then we were playing them again that day. We'd done another 120 minutes, 30 of which was with 10 men.
Yeah. You could sort of see it by the end. I remember Giggsy was limping. He probably did his hamstring on that celebration because I'd never seen Giggsy run that fast since the early 90s. Yeah, we were all just completely overcome by emotion. And again, my old man and I were crying in each other's arms, and it was a moment I'll never, ever forget.
Did you get on the pitch?
No, I didn't.
No worries.
No, I remember the full time when we were leaving, I was sort of overcome by, my God, we're in the FA Cup final, Dad. Can you believe it? And he said, forget what's to come. Think about what's just happened. We've just seen the greatest goal you'll ever see in your life. And he was right.
Yes, mate, absolutely. So obviously following that, we had Sheffield Wednesday on the 17th of April. As we say, the games were coming thick and fast. 3 days later, we knocked them out the road 3-0 before heading to a date with destiny. Second leg in Turin on the 21st of April, mate. 2-0 down after 10 minutes. And if you weren't in United Red, you were thinking these guys are out.
Yeah. I think for weeks we were just listening to what's going to be the hurdle that they're not going to be able to get over. Because they're definitely not going to be able to do it, but how are they not going to be able to do it? And to go 2-0 down to, again, one of the best defensive teams in the world in 10 minutes.
In the Stadio delle Alpi.
Yeah, when an English team had never won in Italy, let alone in the Stadio delle Alpi. You just thought, God, this is going to be the day, isn't it? This is going to be the day that we're going to become unravelled. And it's all going to be for nothing. Because, let's be honest, a double that year wouldn't have been good enough.
Nowhere near good enough, mate. And obviously our skipper, Roy Keane, a man who actually, in the running, in the final games of 99, was not one of the stars at all. This was his pivotal moment on the field, obviously. Obviously picked up a booking and he was going to miss the Champions League final. But Roy Keane doesn't mess around and he fired us and dragged us, mate. It was one of those performances. I know he slagged Fergie off for lauding him so highly for his performance, but I'm going to do exactly the same. Roy Keane, I don't care if you don't want the praise. His performance that night was one of the best I've ever seen from a United player.
Yeah, there's the old nickname that Brian Robson used to have was Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
Of just the captain's performance of just dragging your team up with you. And I remember when Eric came back from his ban, he sort of did the same thing, but I'd never seen an appearance that was more
befitting of the armband.
Exactly. It
was, mate. It was an unbelievable night, a really, really unbelievable night. Yorkie and Coley also adding the goals, and one of their big moments of the run into.
Definitely. I said to you the other day that you think about those last few games, and it's incredible I think that was Dwight Yorke's last goal, given he had scored 28 goals and really been a catalyst to propel us into a world-class team. And you'd think back at those 3 last games, the 3 games that won it all for us, and it was incredible that he never got on the score sheet.
He did score at Anfield. He did score at Anfield on the 5th.
Oh, okay.
But, you know what? Keane and Yorkie, actually, they were 2 of the men of the season. Yorkie with his goals and assists, Keane with his all-round displays. But as we'll touch on, there were all kinds of heroes that year. In the semis, the finals, goal scorers, assisters, penalty saves. We didn't need 1 star, mate. Ginola won the Player of the Year that year. Rivaldo won the Ballon d'Or. Bex came second. And unfortunately, as a team, we were always guilty of just being too good. We had too many stars that not one stood out. So we didn't normally win individual awards back in the day, did we, pal?
No, we didn't. And it was always a sense of contention for me because how someone could have said that our player, not even just winning it, but I think David Beckham was the only one to ever be on the podium of the Ballon d'Or for us in the 90s, which was outrageous.
It was. But you know what is richly deserved from Bex? He had an unbelievable year, 98-99. Really, really answered those critics. But it didn't get any easier, mate. We had to go away to Leeds on the 25th, drew 1-1 at Ellen Road, and then we entered May. And actually, it would be the last time we played at home before the end of the season on the 1st of May, beating Villa 2-1. And then the last 7 games of the season, only 1 would be at Old Trafford.
But again, that's 4 games. I think we played 4 league games in 11 days.
We did, mate. We played Villa. We won 2-1. We went to Anfield, took the lead through Dwight Yorke, doubled our lead through Dennis Irwin from
Yeah.
the penalty spot. Amazing penalty taker back in the day for anyone who doesn't know that.
And then that ridiculous red card. He didn't think the ball went out for a throw-in and played a pass and got sent off for kicking the ball away, which was ridiculous.
And he missed the cup final.
David Ellery, wasn't it?
An absolute berg.
Yeah.
Jamie Redknapp.
I think we were 2-0 up at that time, weren't we? Am I right in thinking? Or we had just conceded?
I think we just conceded the Redknapp penalty.
Yeah.
And that was a devastating blow because Irwin, one of the club men of the decade by far. And it hurt to see him miss out in the cup final. But he had a European Cup final to look forward to. So let's not shed any tears in the 89th minute.
And your old mate Paul Ince thought he took the treble away from us, remember?
Yes, in the 89th minute, Paul Ince fired home and went absolutely mental in front of the Liverpool fans. Yes, he thought he had ruined it. And you know what? That said it all about Paul Ince. Don't get me wrong. That team, that 90, 92, 93, 94 team, when we had Ince and Keane in the middle, we had the wingers running riot, we had Hughesy and Cantona up front.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong. Paul Ince was not out of place at all. He was an absolutely amazing midfielder.
He was the governor.
Keane,
he was the governor.
Yeah, well, self-styled.
Yeah.
I'd say Keane was the governor. Well, at that time, Robson was the governor. But Ince and Keane, they could attack, they could defend, they could dictate play, they could do everything. And you don't see that so often these days. As a player, I can't fault Ince. But as a man, he was always a bitter one, wasn't he?
He was. Big time Charlie.
He thought he had ruined our treble. But as we know, he hadn't. So 2-2 at Anfield, and not the worst result. We then had to go away to Borough. And you know what? In the 90s, Borough a very useful side.
I'm wrong. I'm sorry. Dwight York scored that game as well, didn't he?
Yeah, 1-0.
Really important goal. Yeah. Sorry, I was wrong with what I said earlier.
That's all right, buddy.
They were a great team. They had Ravanelli, Emerson, Janino,
yeah,
and just match winners all over the place.
And I know what you're saying about York. It's just the fact that he was so amazing throughout the season, goals and assists. You are right. At the end, he did drop off a bit. But yes, he did grab the goal there. Away to Blackburn again a good side back then, 0-0 at Ewood Park, and then headed into the last day of the season on the 16th. Spurs at home, managed by George Graham, one of Fergie's old foes.
Well, we were 1 point above Arsenal, am I right?
Yes, and we had the early post hit, didn't we? When Ian Walker fired it off Dwight York, am I right in saying?
Yeah.
And then Rio Ferdinand's uncle, lobbed Schmeichel, and we were 1-0 down and biting our blooming fingernails, weren't we, bud?
Yeah, and to be honest, as were the Spurs fans, because the last thing they wanted to do was to win the title for Arsenal.
Yeah.
And I remember it was right in front of us, Les Ferdinand scored that goal, and he sort of turned around and had this look on his face of, oh God, what have I done? I'll never forget it.
It was so weird, wasn't it? The ball and Schmeichel ended up in the net.
Yeah.
It was a strange one.
Flapping back, it was tough to see.
Don't start with that tough to watch stuff again, mate. It was magical to watch back then. But you know what? This United team, we weren't going down without a fight, and we were so on the front foot all the time. We were pouring forward. Scholes got the ball on the edge of the box, adjusted himself, pushed it beautifully wide to David Beckham on the 42nd minute, and Becks, from an angle, he had no right to score really, dipped and looped one over Ian Walker, and we started believing again, didn't we, pal?
Yeah, that's your favourite David Beckham goal, isn't it?
It's one of them. I've got a few, actually. I used to love Becks back in the day.
I mean, he did score some absolute pearlers.
I particularly liked one of his long ranges at Tottenham
when
he was wearing the number 10 shirt.
Yeah.
So it would have been in possibly 97, I would have thought.
697?
Yeah. And then just after half time, Coley had just come on, hadn't he?
Just come on, first touch, wasn't it?
Gary Neville, left-footed. He says he hoiked it over. I say he clipped it over. It was an amazing ball from Gary, wasn't it?
It was, and something you just certainly didn't think he had in his locker, right? To cut in on his left foot and have a pinpoint 40-yard ball over the defence.
And that was that season, wasn't it, mate? It was, just when you needed a hero to appear, he'd come from the most unlikely of sources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what a goal. Like, let's not mess around. I think the occasion ruined the praise on two fantastic goals. David Beckham's goal that day was incredible, how he managed to clip it in the top corner, in off the post from where he was. And then Andy Cole, to have the calmness just to be able to dink it in over the keeper was amazing. When the pressure was on him there was the most amount of pressure he'd ever felt that day,
Yeah, and actually, that's a great point, because it wasn't so easy. He really had to bring the ball under his spell, didn't he?
Yeah.
Before clipping it over walls. A very unusual goal.
No, just to control it was incredible. He was sort of completely in the air when he managed to bring it down, and then take. I don't know if you think he took another touch. He just dinked it over the keeper. Put an absolute perfect finish.
Yeah, and then he went on the run around Old Trafford, didn't he?
Yeah, as we all did, mate. As we all did. Yeah.
And it was a bit nasty though, wasn't it, mate? I mean, that was the 47th minute. And so we basically had to wait another half of football to be crowned champions. And it's not a nice wait at all, is it, buddy? Knowing the way football goes, knowing the way the season goes, the way things can just spin in a second and everything changes.
No, and I think that if that had been the final game of our season, that if we didn't have a couple of cup finals, that we may have gone on to win 3-4-1. But I think that maybe we were not saving ourselves, but, some of the players, they didn't want to ruin their weeks by pulling up lame, and it was maybe one of those trying to conserve a bit of energy.
Yes, mate, because obviously we did have a party that night. The United lads did go out and have a blowout. Roy Keane was arrested. Fergie had to bail him out on the Sunday.
Yeah.
It was a different time, mate. It was obviously there was no social media back then. The manager did have a bit more control, but he also had less access to information on the players. As we know, Fergie had ex-SAS guys monitoring the movements around Manchester. But it was, in a way, it was, you'd say, oh, you don't want your players going out on the lash all the time. But at the same time, it was a real team, wasn't it? It was a team that went out together, chilled out together, had a laugh together. And I think in those final 11 days, when they needed to be a team more than ever, that actually helped them.
Yeah, there was great team camaraderie between everybody. I was reading something today saying that they used to have a quiz the night before the European away games, and it really helped build that great team spirit that we had and everyone playing for each other. It makes me laugh, though, that Roy Keane getting arrested that night. I remember we used to stay in this hotel just off the M6, and there was a nightclub in the hotel. Some of the players would come in, and one night my brother came up and said, I've just met Roy Keane. He was stuck between the two automatic doors and he got me over to come and open one of the doors, and he was absolutely hammered. It was in 90...
What, stuck as in physically stuck?
Yeah, like he'd gone in the first door. Yeah,
Jammed in.
Gone in the first door and the second door wouldn't open because I guess it was too late. And so he had to get my brother to come over and wave to the sensor to open it. And my brother, he said something to him like, you played great today, Roy. It was actually after we beat Newcastle 2-0. It was that Keith Gillespie game that he scored in, what was that, 94, 95? I think it was October, November 94. And he said, oh, Roy,
95,
no, I think it was 94, because we signed Andy Cole January 95. Keith Gillespie had just scored against them. So I think it was 94, 95. And he said, oh, Roy, you played great today. And he said, if the manager would stop putting me at right back, you'd see me playing a lot better, something like that. He was all pissed up. But
yeah.
It made me laugh as well that, here's Roy Keane, the biggest critic of these players going out and having a good time. That when it was his turn back in the day, he was the first one out with a pint in his hand, living it up,
Yes, mate. I think with that team, they earned the right to misbehave because they always behave themselves on the field. They always put in a performance. Mm-hmm. Obviously, these days, for all I care, Paul Pogba can put hundreds and thousands in his hair. Really, if he performs like Roy Keane, he can do whatever he wants. I'm not bothered. It's just when you're attracting attention for things and not putting the performance in, that's when people have a problem. But yeah, you're right. Keano did take it to extremes. It's interesting as well, mate. In these days, obviously we live in a world where text messages are all the rage, WhatsApp, FaceTimes and all the rest of that. Back in those days, we didn't communicate with people who weren't in the same room as us very often at all. So when you're away with a team, you really were away with a team. You might call your missus for 10 minutes on the blower, but that'd be it. There'd be no texts going on all night. There'd be no checking in. There'd be no FaceTiming the kids saying hello. Yeah. You would not see them. Yeah. And we did go away for long periods of time. And again, I think it was a more fertile breeding ground for a tight squad.
I agree. I definitely agree. There were maybe a few less clicks and just one big group of lads.
Yeah, and you know what? I always thought is one of Fergie's greatest assets, his ability to change with the times. The 80s were different to the 90s. The 90s were different to the noughties. And he was always willing to change, to put his finger on the pulse of the squad and say, okay, maybe I'm an old codger here. And, I will let Ronaldo, for instance, at the sort of back end of the noughties, I will let him go on holiday every year for a week because it's better for the squad. Mm-hmm. In the 90s, I will let these lads go out on the lash because they're becoming friends together. They're building a camaraderie that I can respect. And as long as they do the business on the training field, then I haven't got a problem with that. But yeah, I always saw that as one of Fergie's greatest assets, that his ability to move with the times.
Yeah, I agree. It would be really interesting to see how he would deal with the kind of football of these days and how things have moved in this direction.
Yes, mate. So Keane was all right anyway, and he would start at Wembley knowing that he would miss the Champions League final a week later. So we went to Wembley, mate. Ruud Hullit's Newcastle came to town. Again, a team we had history with. We obviously had that ding-dong battle in 96. Mm-hmm. Where we broke the Geordies' hearts forever. and they would have loved, more than anything, to ruin our treble day, a dream on that day of 22nd of May.
Loved it.
They really would have loved it if we beat them, eh?
Yeah.
Amazingly, after 9 minutes, Roy Keane pulled up. Gary Speed landed a reducer on him, and he was replaced by Teddy Sheringham. And funnily enough, you never know what's a blessing and a curse. And that moment, Gary Speed opened Pandora's box and unleashed Teddy Sheringham on a week-long rampage through anyone who wanted to get in his way.
But wasn't that just typical of that team, though? That here's Teddy Sheringham, huge disappointment of being able to start the FA Cup final. Had never won any silverware before the league title, and the FA Cup in England's the biggest day, the FA Cup final, because back in those days, teams never really got to the European Cup final, so the biggest day in English calendar was always the FA Cup final, and to be told you're not playing, he obviously wasn't happy with it, but managed to come on and sort of use that disappointment to his advantage and turn that negative into a positive, and was man of the match.
Yes, mate, and I'll just elaborate on that a little bit for the listeners. Obviously, we didn't have Sky Sports. We didn't have a lot of live football. We relied on Match of the Day to see the highlights. But one game you could always guarantee would be on terrestrial TV, and the coverage would start very early in the morning, so you'd have a whole day of it, was the FA Cup final. And that's how the tradition of the FA Cup grew so big in England. Mm-hmm. I remember all the FA Cup finals throughout the years of my childhood because it was such a massive day. So yeah, just to highlight that for people who might not be familiar with the 90s, the other guy who was obviously not going to be playing in Barcelona against Bayern Munich in the Champions League final was Paul Scholes. Mm-hmm. So unlike Keane, who had a day to forget, Scholesy decided to put his mark all over Wembley. He started off setting up substitute Sheringham. 2 minutes after Sheringham had come on the 11th minute for Sheringham to fire United ahead. And then on the 53rd minute, Sheringham returned the favour. Yeah. Laid it back. Scholesy fired home. Goal in the FA Cup final. 2-0. It was a walk in the park, wasn't it, mate?
It was a great day.
Yes, mate. So double winners, but it wasn't going to be enough in a season that seemed to have everything. We had to go to Barcelona. We had to complete the treble. And unlike these days where you have maybe a 2-week break, a 3-week break before the Champions League final, we had it 4 days after the FA Cup final, mate. We had 11 days in which we'd won the Premier League, we'd won the FA Cup, and we were travelling to the Nou Camp with a chance to win 3 trophies in 11 days. The first and only time anyone's ever done it.
Yeah, and it was after that game that Sir Alex just very calmly said to them in the locker room to put your medals away, lads, we've got work to do. And they stayed overnight near London, and then we took the Concorde the next day to Barcelona to acclimatise for a few days at least beforehand. Because the temperature between England and Barcelona in mid-May is very different as well.
Yes, it is indeed, mate. And it was very humid that night as well, wasn't it, in Barcelona?
It definitely was.
So, yeah, a massive, massive day. I was watching in school. Me too. I was a young lad. I went to a school which specialised in sport. So we would, week to week, day to day, we'd be watching any sport that would be on at any time. And obviously it was a different time back then. There was more of a sort of national feel to people. Obviously the world's changed a bit. It's all a bit more of a connected world. But in the 90s, it was certainly a common thread that, we hate those Germans in England, Well, it was, let's be honest about it. So, in my school, the people, they really did want United to win because they saw it as England v Germany.
And again, an English team hadn't got to a European Cup final in over a decade. And so it was really one of those, we'll just hope the English team wins it.
Yes, mate. But as we all know with these opposition fans, when the opposition score, they're quite happy to rub it in anyway, aren't they? So it was one of those ones where the country was kind of behind us, but they were also ready with their barbs and
their catcalls.
Exactly, mate. And it wasn't the greatest performance from a United team. We looked like a team that had been to Turin, been to Villa Park twice, been to Anfield, won the title, been to Wembley. We looked like a team that had been through the ringer, didn't we, mate, on that night?
We did. We looked absolutely shattered. And again, losing your first choice central midfield wasn't easy because we lacked a lot in the engine room of the team. Although, that being said, Nicky Butt came in, had a fantastic game, you have to say.
Yeah.
But we did just look shot of energy.
Well, let's look at it, mate. I mean, we had Schmeichel in goal, skippering the side because obviously Keane wasn't there. In his last ever game for United, actually. Gary Neville right back. Jaap Stam had come on for 12 minutes at the end of the cup final. Because he obviously was carrying an injury too. So he was just returning from injury. We had Ronnie Johnson alongside him. Dennis Irwin, who had obviously not played for a couple of weeks because he missed the cup final. He was banned. Mm-hmm. Fergie weighed up playing Giggsy or Beckham in the central midfield berth. I know Giggsy subsequently said he was a bit disappointed. He felt a bit let down that he wasn't the one chosen. But Fergie thought Beckham would be better at holding onto the ball, retaining possession.
I don't think that was an area we did struggle, because that was a team that really relied on fantastic David Beckham crosses being put into the box. Stick him in the middle and we take that out of the game.
Yes, I think possibly Fergie got it a little bit wrong in his starting lineup in terms of just the positions. He didn't have a lot to work with, but yeah, we didn't really create much of a threat, did we? Beckham butt in the middle, Blomqvist on the left, Giggsy on the right. So you, because of the team selection, you had Giggsy out of position and you had Beckham out of position as well. So both of our best wingers out of position, and Coley and York up front. Mm-hmm. And as we all know, Bayern Munich had a free kick early on, and just what we didn't need, mate. A massive, massive deflection. How do you feel when that went in, mate?
Awful. You know, we had come back from being 1 down and the last game against the Spurs. We came from being 1 down against Juventus first leg, 2 down in the second leg. So it was definitely something we were used to, going 1 down and having the confidence in the team to be able to pull it back. So I was pretty disappointed, but, you know, it was just more of the same for this United team.
Exactly, mate. But it did take a while. I mean, they had all sorts of chances. Mehmet Scholl hit the post with that chip, didn't he? Carsten Jank hit the bar. Schmeichel had a save or 2 to make. We were holding on, but it was creating this belief that maybe, just maybe, it might still be our night.
For sure. Just, we can never stop believing, right?
Exactly, mate. And on the 66th minute, Fergie brought off Blomqvist and put on Teddy Sheringham. And obviously, the score remained at 1-0. And on the 80th minute, decided to replace Andy Cole with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Fergie only made 2 subs that night, mate. We had a bench of Raymond van der Houw, Phil Neville, David May, Wes Brown, and Jonathan Greening, who didn't enter the field. So he might have made 2 subs, but you had no other options to put on.
I was going to say, who else would you have liked to have come on? I remember years later we saw Phil Neville play fantastic in the centre of midfield against Arsenal one day. And maybe if he knew that, he maybe would have started Phil Neville in the middle and have Giggs and Beckham on their wings. But they really
Thank God he didn't.
Yeah, probably. There really wasn't. I'm not sure if Phil Neville actually played again after he conceded that penalty. His confidence was shot to bits, but as we all know what happened, we just never stopped believing. We always knew there was going to be we were always going to get 1 chance, and that's all we needed.
Yes, mate. And corner in the 90th minute, David Beckham went over there. The United fans absolutely erupted in that end. As you say, Peter Schmeichel came up, scored 1 in Europe before. Remember.
You remember who it was against, mate? That's a real United trivia question.
And
it was against Rota Volgograd.
I think Andy Cole got the last touch on that, but let's keep that quiet.
Oh, no. 175 goals, you can't.
I'm pretty sure he got a touch on that, mate. But that's another story. 91st minute, David Beckham whipped it in, bit of a scramble. Awful clearance out to Giggsy. Awful shot from Giggsy. Let's be honest about it. And Sheringham, fresh from scoring the FA Cup final a week earlier, fired United into absolute bedlam.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible scenes. And throughout the whole game, all these non-United fans who had been giving us the needle for the whole game, even they were on their feet. It was just a complete overwhelming sense of emotion. Didn't think it could get any better, mate.
Mate, we watched every sporting event that Sky could or the BBC could chuck at us in that room over 2 years at that school. And I've never seen that room erupt like it did when those goals went in. Yeah. I've never seen it. As I say, you know, they were part-timers. There was a few Reds in there. I was embracing them, of course, but I've never seen that room erupt like it did for those goals. It was brilliant.
Yeah, it was one of the few games I unfortunately didn't go to that season, but my brother was there. He was sat right behind the goal, and he arrived in Barcelona much earlier in the morning, had been drinking some Sols or whatever beers they had all day, was a bit worse for wear. And he said that when Sheringham scored that goal, he started crying and throwing up at the same time. He was completely overcome by emotion, and he sat there slumped in his seat, just heaving up chunks. And yeah, what I wanted to give to see that.
It's funny, actually. My mate's dad, actually, Nigel, he always used to tease us about, did I tell you about that time in Barcelona? Because obviously he was at the Nou Camp, but he thought he was winding me up every time he said it. But actually, I loved it. I loved hearing his stories because it got me closer to how it felt in the Nou Camp that day. As for each story he'd tell me, for the joy that he would pass on to me. I used to love hearing those stories, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I don't doubt it.
And then, mate, I was still celebrating the first one. I was with my mate Connor, I think. We were on the seats. We had beers under the sofas, just in case the old teacher came in. Me and Connor, and I think my mate Si, we were all going absolutely bananas. And the TV was about a yard away from us. Yeah. We were on the chairs. We were jumping up and down, the three of us. And then we basically looked up as Beckham took that second corner. Sheringham got the touch, another assist. So a goal and assist in the FA Cup final, a goal and assist in the Champions League final, and our boss, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, with his right foot into the top corner of the Nou Camp net, etched himself into United folklore forever and a day.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't tell you what happened in the minute before the corner.
Neither could I.
In fact, when I looked at the TV again and we had a corner, I thought they were actually showing a replay of the first goal. And then it was Big Ron Atkinson was the commentator, and he said, they must be playing defensive, Schmeichel's staying back. And that's when I realised...
The big goalie's not coming up. That's what he said, isn't it?
And that's when I realised we had a different corner. And as I say, I didn't think the feeling I had when Sheringham put it in could have got any better. And it just probably doubled when Ollie stuck it in.
Yes, mate. I don't remember much about it, and I don't think many Reds do. What I will say is that we have to tip our hats again to David Beckham, because 2 corners under the most immense pressure, and he delivered again, didn't he?
Yeah, that second goal was probably one of the best corners I've ever seen. Just perfectly put it in, and you could see for 80-odd minutes we looked shot to bits. And for those couple of minutes, the Bayern Munich players did themselves that they were struggling to get clear, and then you could sort of see a lot of hands on hips getting ready for the second corner. And
it was very weird, mate. That second corner, as it came in, it was almost like it was written in the stars. It was almost like there's no way United aren't going to score another one here. It was very, very weird.
Yeah, it was. And again, you look at how we scored it. We had 6-7 players in the box, and none of them were in the 6-yard box, which is where you sort of wanted them to be, apart from, I remember Sheringham sort of ghosted in at the front, and there was Ollie right in the middle. But it was incredible to see that we didn't have more players packing forward, like we almost knew we didn't need them.
It was one of Sheringham's fortes, wasn't it? The old near post flick.
Yeah, he was one of the most intelligent footballers we've had at United in the last 25 years. And it was his greatest touch as a United player, I think.
And the Arsenal fans enjoyed that, didn't they? Oh, Teddy, Teddy came to Man United and you won the lot.
Yeah.
As the song was changed very, very swiftly to. The Arsenal fans had a different edit in the year before that. So, but you know what, mate? I think this is a fair time to just highlight the contribution of Beckham that year. I know some people, and as history goes on and he becomes even more of a monstrous celebrity than he was at the time, and obviously there was massive focus from the press on his extracurricular activities. But David Beckham that year, his performance was top draw. Really, really world class. Work rate off the chain. Came second in the Ballon d'Or. Goal on the final day of the Premier League season. 2 corners that led to us winning the Champions League, a goal in the FA Cup semi-final, a great attitude throughout. So anyone who thinks that David Beckham was just a blooming poster boy doesn't know their football.
Absolutely. 100% agree with you there, mate. I think his maybe acrimonious exit put a lot of the good stuff he did do into the shade. That when you think about Reds who gave absolutely everything for their team, a lot of people would put Gary Neville up on the top of that list, very deservedly so. But David Beckham was another one of those who, what it meant for him to be a Red was exactly how we would all feel being in that same position. And he was a voice for the fans a lot in terms of his attitude and his effort given. And as well, there you're looking at a global superstar. We've had some now, we've had some since as well, who their attitudes get questioned and their commitment to the cause gets questioned, but there was an absolutely global superstar who gave everything he had for that team, and we absolutely adored him as fans.
We did. And you know what, mate? It's a very good point you make there, that his acrimonious exit changed opinions. It changed mine a bit for years. I always put him down on the list, because I did love him, and because I was hurt that he did leave with a cloud over his head. I know Fergie thought that Victoria was having too much influence on him, but when you look back, mate, when he was with United, forget the exit, forget the years after. When he was with United, he was an absolutely sensational player and a bloody good bloke too.
Yeah, you'd have to go a long, long way to find someone who put a better cross in or who hit a better free kick. He was absolute mustard. And I remember for a good 10 years, we used to get a free kick within 25 yards and everyone was just like, wow, this is Beckham range. It's going to be a goal. It was almost as banging as having a penalty.
Yes, mate. And you know what? We've highlighted Beckham, but let's have a look at that season as a whole, because there were so many heroes that year, pal. I know we did the Player of the Year awards, we did the official awards, and then we did our unofficial 100% United awards as well. And we were scrambling around for names. In 99, it was almost the whole squad. Dwight York was, you'd say, the star attacker. Amazing first season. Obviously scored his goal in the Champions League semi-final. But at the end of the season, as we alluded to, He wasn't at the fulcrum of the team. Keane as well, again, the leader of the side, did get his goal in the semi-final of the Champions League, but it was left to others to hold fort. We Giggsy, we had his late equaliser against Juve. We had the Arsenal goal. We had the assist in the Champions League final. We had Sheringham, as I've touched on, goal assist FA Cup final, goal assist Champions League final.
Mm-hmm.
We had Solskjaer with the amazing comeback in the FA Cup v Liverpool, and then the winner to end all winners in the final. Coley, Premier League winner, the winning goal, Champions League semi, goal as well. Schmeichel, FA Cup semi penalty save, captain in the final. Stam, I would say the best defender in Europe by a mile. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would.
And then Scholes.
And Ronnie Johnson wasn't far behind him. He was a fantastic influence on everyone and a really calming influence on that whole defence. But yeah, Scholesy as well.
Scholesy, yeah. FA Cup final goal, assist, and an assist on the final day of the Premier League season. That pass out to Bex, one of my favourites from Scholesy. I know it was simple, but it was blooming nice.
Just the whole team was the stars, right? And I
didn't mention Dennis Irwin, unbelievable player. I didn't mention Gary Neville. I might have missed one or two others, but in terms of when you look...
Nicky Butt.
Yeah, Nicky Butt, of course. A much better player than people give him credit for, actually. And a much better passer than people give him credit for as well.
Yeah, he's sitting next to... he's trying to displace Roy Keane and Paul Scholes, who...
Exactly.
Are arguably the most heart and the best passer out of any player in that team.
Yeah.
But he was sort of a nice mix of the two.
Nicky Butt would be the captain and our best player in the team now. So
yeah, by a mile.
He would, by a mile. And he'd sort Pogba out as well. He'd give him a right old slap if he stepped out of line.
But isn't it funny that you think back at that time, that year especially, that we had the partnership to end all partnerships up front. We had Dwight York and Andy Cole. And it just fitting for that entire team that it was Sheringham and Solskjaer who got the headlines in the end. And it just put light on the whole team. And it was everybody in that team. It wasn't just those two.
Well, yeah, and there was no Scholes and Keane in the middle.
Yeah.
We had Butt and Beckham in the middle of the midfield for the final too. So it just enhances the point you just made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely unbelievable, mate. And do you remember anything from after the celebrations? I remember just briefly thinking that if we ever get to another Champions League final, I've got to be there.
Yeah, I did think that. I remember calling my old man. I was in school as well. I was up in boarding school and I called my old man and he answered the phone with a croaky voice. And, he was lucky enough. He was in the cup final in 68. And I said, how does this feel compared to that? And he said, son, I might have gone to the first one, but this one feels much better.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, we called my brother. I think he said he had spoken to my brother, or this was a few hours later when I spoke to him again, because I called him, but just before I had to go to bed and say, did that really happen? Did we really just see that? Or did I just dream the whole thing? And he said, I've just spoken to your brother. He sounds a bit worse for wear, but he's all right.
Mate, if I knew what I know now about life on that day when United returned and went through Deansgate and did a tour through Manchester, I would have left my school that day. I would have jumped on a train and I would have gone to Manchester and I would have had one of the best days of my life.
I agree.
Unfortunately, I wasn't quite grown up enough to realise that you can pretty much do what you want in life.
As well, we thought we've got a team here that we're going to go and dominate Europe for a few years to come, that this is just going to be... And let's be honest, mate, we had how many open-top parades have we had throughout the 90s? It was almost every other year.
It was, but that was again, a parade to end-all parade.
Yeah.
You look at City's last week in comparison to that. That was mental that day.
Yeah. You had grown man crying, hanging off lampposts. It was just bedlam, and it was completely deserved as well.
Yes, man. It was a different time. The 90s, it was a decade for the rebels, and so when we partied, we properly partied. It was a decade of mad music, mad styles, shell suits everywhere, and when we partied, we went pretty wild, didn't we, mate?
We definitely did. I think that you're right these days. With everything being televised, that maybe detracts a lot of people from having to endure that kind of stuff. But it was one of those things, again, wasn't there, but I will never, ever forget seeing those pictures of the parade thinking, my God, it's bigger than I could have ever expected it to be.
Yes, mate. And you know what? Sometimes you get a year come along that you're pretty much never going to repeat. Like I said with the Giggsy goal, it's always the best the first time you see it. And even if we won another treble, I'm not sure it'll ever top that year in 99, pal. What do you think?
Completely agree with you. This year, Champions League semi-finals, we've had a couple of huge comebacks. Liverpool came back against Barcelona and that pretty incredible comeback from Tottenham against Ajax. And people were even having the audacity to compare the two, saying, could this be the greatest Champions League comeback of all time? And you're just thinking those people are having a laugh.
Try seeing the opposition's colours on the cup like we did.
Yeah.
UEFA had put the blue and red ribbons on for Bayern. Lothar Matthäus, I remember him coming down. He'd won the World Cup. He'd won everything, hadn't he? And it was his last chance. It was his final game too. And it was his chance to win the European Cup. And he threw his runners-up medal away, didn't he, as he came off the podium?
Well, I remember seeing him lauding the crowd and of giving it a large one, saying that they had already won it. But I think I read somewhere that the president of UEFA, the one who gave us the cup, he had come down from his box. It was 1-0 to Bayern. And he came down, and by the time he came down, we were winning 2-1. And he was like, "What's going on here?" Didn't even see him.
And didn't Bestie miss it? Wasn't he in having a pint?
Yeah. I was going to say that. You give me hell for missing the extra time of the first leg of the semi-final, but George Best missed both goals.
How many European Cups have you won for United?
None yet.
But yeah, mate, it was unbelievable. We had Albie, the kit man, celebrating in front of the Bayern bench, rubbing it in their faces. He felt that they had rubbed it in our faces. But yes, mate, it was an unbelievable night. There was just stuff going on everywhere, wasn't there? We had Schmeichel doing cartwheels. United obviously painted the town red, and that team really could party. Luckily, in those days, we didn't have phone cameras. We didn't have videos everywhere. So you could misbehave a bit more than you can these days. I'd like to see what really happened on those nights, mate. I really would.
It'd be incredible. Really would be incredible.
Yes, mate. And you know what? My abiding memory of that night really is the joy on the faces of the Nevilles and Beckham. The Reds, who had come through the youth academy. Obviously, Keane and Scholesy weren't so keen to get their mitts on the cup, wearing their suits. But the Neville brothers...
That was better than getting all John Terry and putting everything on. You know, it was pretty humble to see.
It was indeed, buddy. But yeah, my abiding memory is just like you say, the Beckham and the Nevilles, Nicky as well, mirroring what we were feeling. Almost a look of disbelief on their faces that they were the boys that brought the European Cup back to Manchester after all those years.
Yeah, there was a beautiful picture of Sir Alex and Sir Bobby in the dressing room after the game, and it was the happiest I'd ever seen Sir Bobby Charlton. There was another great picture of Ollie walking in and Fergie already standing there with a bottle of champagne in his hand.
I know the one.
That's a picture that I'll never forget, and just hope we can repeat those scenes with this current team, because there's a whole generation of United fans that deserve the feeling that we had that night.
Yes, mate, and there was one more spectator in the sky that night. Sir Matt, on his 90th birthday, it would have been. What a coincidence, eh? That United bring home the European Cup on the great man's, what would have been his 90th birthday, eh?
Yeah, and it's sort of, now it all makes sense that it happened as it did, right? Oh, it was Sir Matt's birthday. Of course it was going to happen like this. It was the greatest spectacle for one of the greatest men of our football club.
And just like the 08 was the anniversary of our first European Cup win, and the year of the Busby Babes too.
Yeah, crazy. 50th anniversary of the devastation of Munich and the 40th anniversary of 68, yeah.
Yeah, if you don't believe in miracles and dreams, mate, then what do you believe in, eh?
You need to.
So as everyone knows, we've got this reunion match on Sunday, the 26th, where the treble team will reconvene and take on Bayern. Should be a little bit of fun at Old Trafford, raising money for the Manchester Foundation. Should be a bit of a laugh, shouldn't it, pal?
You definitely should. And again, I hope this podcast can evoke some of those memories of 20 years ago.
Yes, mate. And as I touched on last week, you know, if we can all evoke that spirit, if we can all get behind the team like we have in our glory days, then we'll have a much bigger chance of returning to the glory days. We've got to return to those days where we're united as a club. We've got Ollie as manager now. Who would have thought it 20 years later, mate, when Ollie stuck his toe on that ball and sent us all into ecstasy, and that he'd now be our boss. I mean, what a mad world we live in. But if anyone deserves our full support, it's the man who gave us probably the greatest day in our history.
For sure, and a great advert of what is truly possible in life.
Yeah, and Ollie actually called his pal back in Norway that day, and he said, look, make sure you watch tonight, because I got a feeling something special is going to happen to me. And Ollie's always been like that, and this is why I'll always back him as our boss. Ollie's got magic. He's got magic running through his veins. I don't know what it is about the guy, but he just has a way of turning up and just turning nothing into something. And let's hope, mate, that he can lead us back to the top of the game, because it would be just like Manchester United for that to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just stay behind the team, and that's all we can hope for.
So we hope you've enjoyed this United flashback. 1999 will always be a year to put a smile on our faces. Memories to last a lifetime. Thanks for joining me again, Scott.
Thank you, TC.
Cheerio, Reds.
Ta-ra.